All right, so today we're going to be in Exodus chapter 32. Now, in this chapter, there are exactly 35 verses. And Exodus chapter 32, if you look at the pre-header, it's talking about when Aaron made the golden calf for the Israelites. Now, for context, Moses is still on the mountain. We saw that in 31. They were talking about priestly duties and different things like that. And so in 32, we see that they're actually, while Moses is on the mountain, the people come to Aaron. You know what? Let me not spoil it for you. You'll see it in a second. But Moses is still on the mountain at this time, and we're going to see what the Israelites do as Moses is speaking to God. So we're going to get right into that. But first, our memory verse for the week. I didn't memorize it this week. I got to read it. I got to memorize it before the day is over with. It says, "Woe for the one who builds his place through unrighteousness, his upper rooms through injustice, who make his fellow man serve without pay, and will not give him his wages." This is Jeremiah 22, verse 13. So don't forget to keep up with the memory verses, and let's get right into it on the Christian Boy Podcast. Chapter 32. When the people saw that Moses delayed in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god who will go before us, because this Moses, the man who brought us from the land of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Then Aaron replied to them, "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people took off the gold rings that were on their ears and brought them to Aaron. He took the gold from their hands, fashioned it with an engraving tool, and made it into an image of a calf. Then they said, "Israel, this is your God, who brought you up from the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it. Then he made an announcement. "There will be a festival to the Lord tomorrow." Early the next morning they arose, offered burnt offerings, and presented fellowship offerings. The people sat down to eat and drink, then got up to play. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Go down at once, for your people you brought from the land of Egypt have acted corruptly. They have quickly turned from the way I commanded them. They have made for themselves an image of a calf. They have bowed down to it, sacrificed to it, and said, 'Israel, this is your God who brought you up from the land of Egypt.'" The Lord also said to Moses, "I have seen this people, and they are indeed stiff-necked people. They are indeed stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone so that my anger can burn against them and I can destroy them. Then I'll make you into a great nation." But Moses interceded with the Lord, his God. "Lord, why does your anger burn against your people? You brought out the land of Egypt with great power and a strong hand. Why should the Egyptians say, 'He has brought them out with an evil intent to kill them in the mountains and wipe them off the face of the earth'? Turn from your great anger and relent concerning this disaster planned for your people. Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. You swore to them by your very self and declared, 'I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky, and will give your offspring all this land that I have promised, and they will inherit it forever.' So the Lord relented concerning the disaster and said he would bring on his people. Then Moses turned and went down the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands. They were inscribed on both sides, inscribed front to back. The tablets were the work of God, and the writing of God's writing. And the writing was God's writing engraved on the tablets. When Joshua heard the sound of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, 'There's a sound of war in the camp.' But Moses replied, It is not a sound of victory cry, and not the sound of a cry of defeat. I hear the sound of singing." As he approached the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, Moses became enraged and threw the tablets out of his hands, smashing them at the base of the mountain. Then he took the calf they made, burned it up, and ground it to powder. He scattered the powder over the surface of the water and forced the Israelites to drink the water. Then Moses asked Aaron, "What did these people do to you that you have led them into such a grave sin?" "Don't be enraged, my lord," Aaron replied. You yourself know that the people are intent on evil. They said to me, make us a god who will go before us, because this Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. So I said to them, well, whoever has gold, take it off. And they gave it to me. Then I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Moses saw that the people were out of control, for Aaron had let them get out of control, resulting in weakness before their enemies. And Moses stood at the camp's entrance and said, whoever is for the Lord, come to me. And all the Levites gathered around him. He told them, this is what the Lord said. The Lord, the God of Israel, says, every man fasten his sword to his side, go back and forth through the camp from the entrance to entrance, and each of you kill his brother, his friend, and his neighbor. The Levites did as Moses commanded, and about 3,000 men fell dead that day among the people. Afterward, Moses said, today you have been dedicated to the Lord, since each man went against his brothers, his son, and his brother. Therefore, you have brought a blessing on yourselves today. The following day, Moses said to the people, you have committed a grave sin. Now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I will be able to atone for your sin. So Moses returned to the Lord and said, oh, these people have committed a grave sin, and they have made a god of gold for themselves. Now, if you would only forgive their sin, but if not, please erase me from the book you have written. The Lord said to Moses, I will erase whoever has sinned against me from my book. Now go, lead the people to the place I told you about. See, my angel will go before you, but on the day I settle accounts, I will hold them accountable for their sin. And the Lord inflicted a plague on the people for what they did with the calf Aaron had made. All right, so this chapter had a lot of stuff going on, like a whole lot. So you already know what it went through. So Moses is still on the mountain, and the people come to Aaron and ask him to make a god for them, which is crazy because why? They saw all these miracles and the reverent fear of the Lord was in them at the time. But then, as Moses is up the mountain for all the days as he's up there, 40 days and 40 nights, I believe, Israel gets bored, They saw the wonders of the word of the Lord. The Lord was going to talk to them all together. They had fear and reverence towards him. And then when God became silent to them for these 40 days and 40 nights, they find themselves wanting a God that they will have. Make us a God who will go before us while Moses is on the mountain. And the worst part is Aaron obliges them. Notice how we can see now why God is making Aaron the priest, because Aaron has the ability to lead the people into worship, regardless of if it's for God or if it's for the golden calf that he creates here. So that's what we see. That's why God was going to make, Yahweh or the Lord was going to make Aaron a priest, because of how he has the ability to lead the people into worship. Aaron was literally someone who the people could trust, leading them into worship, into Yahweh or whatever God they wanted. That's what we see here. They tell Aaron, hey, come on, make us a god. And he's like, you know what? Sure, I'll do it. Everybody give me your gold. Let's make a god and let's worship it. And then he even tells them, let's make tomorrow we're going to have a festival to the Lord and we're going to celebrate God. And as they're doing that, the Lord tells Moses, yeah, go down because these people are doing bad. But there's an interesting thing that happens. Before Moses even goes down, Moses asks God, why should your anger burn against your people whom you brought out of Egypt with your great power and a mighty hand? He's asking God, why? I understand that you're angry, but why should your anger burn against them in order to punish them or in order to make them lose the promise that you promised them that they would have? Did you bring them out of Egypt just so that the Egyptians can say, see, God was actually trying to punish them. So he brought them out just to kill them. And then Moses does what we've seen happen before. He reminds God of his promises. He says, remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel or Jacob, whom you swore to by yourself. I will make your descendants. He promised Abraham that he will make his descendants as numerous as the stars. And so Moses is reminding him of that. And then the Lord relented and did not bring disaster as he had threatened. After Moses seeks God's favor, which is a very important thing. As a leader, you have to seek the favor of the people that you lead. Sometimes people do things that they're not supposed to, and sometimes we do things that we're not supposed to do. And so by seeking the favor of the Lord for the people, he helps not only subside God's anger, but actually it helps them out by, saving their lives from being destroyed and restarting the whole entire tribe of Israel. So after that, Moses goes down, he approaches them. He breaks the unfortunately, when he saw the worshiping of the calf, he breaks the tablets with the 10 commandments on there and the commandments from the Lord. He breaks those tablets at the foot of the mountain, the foot of the mountain, the final place of God's respect, reverence of God's presence. That's when he loses his cool and destroys everything. So he was cool all on the mountain because God resided on the mountain. But as soon as he got down, he destroyed the tablets. I just thought that was interesting. So in verse 21, he asks Aaron, because, Aaron is the priest for them at this moment. He's the one that helped lead them into this sin. He asked Aaron, why did you lead them into such a great sin? Aaron said, don't be angry, my Lord. You know how prone these people are to evil. Then he tells them what they told him to do. But Aaron still had a choice. And sometimes we find excuses for our sin. I know I do. When I sin and when I fall short, sometimes I try to find an excuse as to why I did what I did. And honestly, there is no excuse, because though Aaron said these people are prone to doing evil, they told him to make a god for them. And he claims that he just put it in the fire and out came a golden calf. But at the beginning of the chapter, he says, take off your gold rings. They all put it off. He took what they handed them and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf. And now here he claims that out came a calf. It just formed into a golden calf. I just put the fire in there, put a fire on the metal, and it came into a calf. I didn't have a particular shape I wanted it to become, which is not entirely the case. He made it into a calf, or at least from his point of view, he decided to just put it in there. And it came out as a calf. And then we see in verse 25, Moses saw that the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them get out of control. And so became a laughing stock to their enemies. That happens to us all the time. I'm going to talk about myself. I can't talk about Moses and the Israelites, but we see things that got out of control. Sometimes we lose our you know what? Let's not say we. I'm going to leave y'all alone today. Sometimes I lose my discipline. Even this week, I lost my discipline and fell into sin and fell into laziness. I'm not even doing the homework that I'm supposed to be doing, but sometimes we fall into sin. We lose control of our own lives, mainly forgetting that life is not supposed to be in our control. So we try to take life into our control, just like the Israelites did by trying to cast themselves of God, right? We take our own lives into our control, trying to make gods for ourselves, forgetting the God who brought us out of all of our sin and iniquity, forgetting the God who we used to revere just a few chapters ago, just 40 days ago, and we're too afraid to talk to. And we take God for granted. John Bevere wrote a book. He wrote a book called Fear the Lord. I just listened to it. I listened to the audiobook of it. It was a very great book. It talks about how irreverence towards the Lord leads us into sin and ruins our ability to actually truly worship God in an authentic sense. Because where there is no fear of the Lord, there is no wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. If you don't have fear of the Lord, you have no wisdom. If you have no fear of the Lord, you cannot truly love or trust the Lord. Neither can you truly follow what the Lord tells you to do, because you don't have any reverence or respect for God. You're not going to listen to what he says. Now, that goes back to me. When I try to take my life into my own hands, and Lord knows I end up falling into sin. I end up, turning off the blockades on my phone to stop me from watching things I'm not supposed to watch. End up spending too much time on TikTok. End up spending too much time watching things I definitely know I shouldn't be watching. And then comes the condemnation or the shame that comes afterward. And it all comes from me trying to put something else into God's place. Israel tried to put a new God into God's place because God was silent towards them, even though that's what they wanted. They were afraid that Moses was not going to come back. They were afraid that all the stuff that they did was a waste of time with God. So let's make our own God for ourselves. And sometimes in our lack of patience, well, in my lack of patience, I'll say, I put something else in front of God. I put something else in front of what's important. So yeah, verse 25 is just interesting because Moses saw that the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them get out of control. Are we allowing our lives to get out of control? In the sense that you used to pray every day, like I used to pray every day. Now, sometimes I fail on that. Or I used to read my Bible every day. Now I don't read my Bible at all. Am I allowing my life to get out of control to the point where I'm too busy to do things, to spend time with God, where I'm too busy to worship and pray? I'm going to church, but I'm not actually focusing on Him. If I'm spending too much time doing those things, my life gets out of control, because ultimately what happens is, especially with me, I get comfortable after like a week or so of being able to pray, read my Bible, pray to the Lord, focus on those things. I get comfortable and say, the things that I'm fighting against, whether it be the temptation of lust and pornography or different things like that, I say, you know what? I'm getting comfortable. I can do what I want to do. I can relax because I've been doing good. Let me take a little bit of the control back. Instead of relying on God for every single thing and having to pray and read my Bible every day, I can take some time on TikTok. I can take some time watching some YouTube videos that have nothing to do with anything important. I can take some time sitting idly, relaxing, watching TV, especially stuff I'm not supposed to be watching. And then the idleness and the lack of discipline and lack of reverence towards the Lord leads into more sin. And so the distraction and the sickness becomes that I let my life get out of control. I'm just like Aaron. I let the people run wild. I let my sin and my flesh run wild. And I can notice it happening sometimes in regular stuff that happens. Like, let's say I don't need to eat 2 plates, but I end up eating 2 plates anyway. Or let's say I finish my homework, I'm about to go read my Bible. I don't read my Bible, I get on TikTok. I have timers set up, 10-minute timers for each app. Sometimes my flesh still desires more of the app. I click on the app and continue going on. Sometimes I turn off my blocker and blockade to keep me from watching things I'm not supposed to be watching. Or sometimes I watch things, rated R movies, or things I'm not supposed to be watching. And that's how it starts. First, it starts off by the flesh getting a little bit of headroom, of us losing our discipline. If we allow sin to take an inch, it's going to take 2 inches, 3 inches, 4, until it ends up taking us where we're not supposed to go. So this chapter is really just for me. And then Moses, here's another important part. He verse 26 says, so he stood at the entrance to the camp. So he stood at where the door is, and he said, whoever's for the Lord, come to me. And all the Levites rallied around him. And then he tells them to go into the camp and kill those who are not for God. We have to kill those things off we have to make a distinction in our own lives. We have to draw the line. And I'm drawing the line constantly. I have to keep drawing the line and keep coming back to God, because we have to make the distinction. Am I for God or am I for these things of this world? So you have to make the distinction. If you're for the Lord, stand on His side. Come to Him. Stand on His side. Or, stand for the world and do what the world wants you to do. So when you make the distinction, you have to kill off all those things that are going to cause you to fall astray or not be for God. In my case, it's different social media, different things that, laziness is one of them, a lack of discipline. I get up every morning to drive to school, but I have to do that. But a lack of discipline in certain areas, or, over impulsive watching, binge watching a lot of stuff when you have to do other things with your time, a lack of responsibility with your time, standing on distinction and allowing yourself not to fall into traps or into tricks is very important. And making sure you draw the line to where you're not going to cross, and making sure that line is far enough away from the cliff to where you have no risk of falling is much more important. So then after they cleanse the camp of all the people who were not going to be in, what does Moses do? He goes back to the Lord and he asks God to please forgive their sin. But if He's not going to forgive this sin, he stands in the gap for them and says, blot me out as well if you're not going to do it. God says, whoever sinned against me. So Moses stands in the gap for the people. He asks for forgiveness. He asks for God to give them another chance. And if He's not going to give them another chance, don't give me another chance. How often are we interceding for those who have fallen into sin that we may know of. Like I have friends who sins because everybody sins. Welcome, surprise to the real world, I guess. But I have people who sin in my life or sin around me. Am I praying on their downfall and their conviction and their shame? Or am I praying that they come back to the fear of the Lord and come back into his right well-being? Am I standing in the gap for them when they don't even want to stand in the gap for themselves? Or am I allowing them to be taken away because of what they do? So yeah, that's what I love about Moses here. He stands in the gap for them, and it says, if you won't forgive them, you might as well let me go too. Blot me out of the book that you have written if you're not going to save them from the sins that they have committed. And God tells him that he will blot out whoever he blots out of his book. Now go and lead the people to the place I spoke of, and my angel will go with you. And then the Lord gives the people a plague for the sins that they committed. And Moses actually, this whole chapter, he interceded on behalf of those people. So sure, you may not be like me, struggling with the distinction and the drawing of the line at the cliff sometimes. And sure, maybe let's say you're perfect. You don't do any of those things. You don't mess up. You don't sin, and you don't fall short sometimes. Okay. Let's say you're doing very well on that. You're reading your Bible every day. You're praying every day. Are you praying for others who may be struggling or falling short or maybe in sin? Are you praying that they, first off, are delivered from their sin, and secondly, turn away from their sin and make a distinction in their lives? And sometimes a distinction is hard to make because, again, life and the flesh tries to fight against you so much. That's why fasting and prayer is so important, because if we don't fast and pray, these things won't go away. But let's say you're telling me, Keely, I do all of that. Maybe this episode wasn't for me. Well, then are you praying and interceding on behalf of others? Because if you're not praying and interceding on behalf of others, how can you call yourself a leader or a servant of God? How can you call yourself someone who fears the Lord, but doesn't fear him enough to recognize the judgment that he can bring on others and pray on their behalf that they find forgiveness, peace, and love with him? So that's something to think about. Honestly, this chapter hits me every time I read it because I continue to draw the line. I have to continue to stand for what I believe in and stand against the flesh that may come to fight me and the flesh that may come to take over what I'm trying to do, or take over the good that God is trying to do through me, take over the good that God is trying to produce through me through prayer and fasting. So if we allow Satan to let us get comfortable because God may be silent, or we're in a season of testing, or we're in a season of difficulty and different things going on, or we're in a new season in our lives, we're falling for the trap of allowing our discipline and our sin to get more and more inches in our lives until we find ourselves too close to the cliff to hang on. So draw the line, draw the distinction, and do not fall off the cliff. All right, God bless you. I pray that you were blessed by this episode, and I'll see you on the next episode if the Lord wills. Hey, thank you for watching this episode. I pray you were blessed by it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment down below what your favorite part of the episode was, and I pray that you have a blessed day. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and we have a TikTok, Christian Boy Podcast, everywhere you look, CBP on TikTok. And don't forget to go to christianboypodcast.com to see the memory verse list and read the newest newsletter. So God bless you, and I pray that you are blessed. All right, bye-bye.